Hello everybody, welcome back to ComedIan MTG. My name is Ian. On today's episode, we are going to be breaking down the top 16 from Festival of Nights. So this was a Philadelphia-based Eminence event tournament. So 153 players showed up for this event, and we got the top 16 today, the semi-finals and finals matches for this tournament. It was a slog. I was in this tournament. You'll see one of my decks here today, and it was really good. We had a lot of players who were known for doing really well who did not even make the top 16, and we had some known players who performed very well at these events, make 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th place. So a lot of really good players didn't make this top 16, and a lot of really good players did, and it was a great tournament. I'm really a big fan of these 7-round Swiss cEDH tournaments because they really make you put in the work. I mean, I definitely feel like I sweat the whole time, and it was a really cool tournament. And this is the first Eminence event that actually was hosted inside of a game store, the larger scale Eminence event, I should say. Usually they're inside of the hotel that the room blocks are in, but this one is actually inside one of a game store in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania called Sword and Stone, and it was a really good time. But enough details about this tournament. Excited to break down the top 16 today. While you're here on YouTube, just remember to hit like and subscribe, and if you're interested in supporting this channel, check out patreon.com/ComedIanMTG, and if you're interested to hear about cEDH coaching, feel free to hit me up on Gmail, hit me up on Twitter, or on Discord. Any of those places is awesome. Without any further ado, let's jump into this top 16 right now. So we have Stealth Duck here with my general cost 7. Fun fact, we actually have 2 siblings in the top 16 today, and they did play in the semifinals match. This is one of our siblings here, Stealth Duck, and they were playing Atraxa, the Grand Unifier. Now we have an Atraxa list here. One of the first things I noticed when looking at this Atraxa list is we have this Walking Ballista here in the creature slot, which I'm actually kind of okay with in this deck. It's a little bit of an atypical piece. One, I like that it can be either of the slots for Atraxa, right? So you can either take it as your artifact for Atraxa's ability, or you can take it as your creature. The other thing is that a lot of the time with these Atraxa lists, they have been struggling to actually win the game with food chain mana because, people can draw the majority of their deck, but then sometimes they're having trouble, especially if they lose their Thassa's Oracle, finding an outlet to actually just straight up, boom, I win the game, right? So Walking Ballista is just kind of like a nice clean way of doing that. It's not the highest card quality option that we have available to us, but I think it's one of the better ones in general, and glad to see it played here. Very interesting choices in mana dorks here. I know Arbor Elf is one that a lot of people struggle with, especially in 4-color decks. I know I've cut it from a lot of my decks in this sort of space playing these dorks, but we have Birds, Deathrite, and Noble here as the split up. A lot of the standard creatures you'd expect in sort of this like 4-color good stuff pile. We have our only singleton enabler for the food chain combo here with Mist Hollow Griffin, and we have our Displacer Kitten to be able to combo off with Teferi, as well as just being kind of generally busted with Atraxa. We got a lot of interesting wheels here. We have Time Twister and Windfall, which is our best blue wheels by far. We do have our Smothering Tithe as obviously a good payoff for having those wheels effects, and as we notice here in the creature slots, we have our Orcish Bowmasters as well. So definitely playing 2 ways to really pay off for it. It's interesting because Smothering Tithe is obviously one of those cards that you're going to play when you have a 7-mana commander in the command zone in general. So the question is, when you play these wheel effects, we obviously have 2 payoffs here that sort of break parity on just playing a wheel in a standard sense, but you got to wonder with decks like Rogsai in the format or Blue Farm and other very quick decks like that, how often is a wheel going to actually bite you in the butt as opposed to being able to be really effective in your list. Apart from that, a lot of the 4-color good stuff options, Mnemonic Betrayal seeing play here. I know this is a card that's been really heavily debated as of late. A lot of people say it's a really good card. A lot of people say that it's just kind of been awful every time I've seen play. I've had some pretty bad luck with Mnemonic Betrayal in my games as of late, and I know a lot of other mid-range players are sort of echoing that sentiment and seeing just like graveyards, even in grindier games, just not having a lot of pieces in there. And maybe it's the fact that certain decks are no longer jamming a bunch of wheels early in the game, and that definitely could have a lot to do with that. Also interested to see Neoform and Eldritch Evolution in these Atraxa lists. I know there's a lot of debate about how many of these effects you play, especially given the fact that there's 18 creatures in the deck, and Atraxa is obviously not neoforming into anything that attractive. This list is also choosing to play Ad Nauseam, which has been sort of one of the main debates in the Atraxa community. How fast do you lean into going into a quicker version of this list as opposed to, playing the Atraxa game, grinding it out, maybe going a little bit slower and not having that Ad Naus as a backup plan. All in all, pretty solid list, and congrats to Stealth Duck on the top 16. We have Adaptive Najeela by Shadow Walker 13. Now, this is a really cool story for me personally because Shadow Walker and I had a coaching session a few days before this tournament where this is like their first major CEDH tournament that they were able to attend. We made a bunch of swaps to the deck, and several of them apparently paid off and led to victories. So it was really cool to, you know, I've definitely had coaching sessions before where people have immediately sort of reported back top 16 performances, but it was really cool to have this, and really cool to see like such a quick turnaround, and the fact that certain cards that we talked about adding into the list actually paid off. Especially, I know that the re-edition of Grim Hireling into the list really helped a lot, so that was just really cool to hear. But we have a pretty standard Najeela Turbo deck, right? We've talked about this deck a decent amount on this channel. It is trying to either leverage ad nauseum wins, winning with Underworld Breach, using cards like Grim Hireling, like we just talked about, or Derevi, to be able to take infinite combats with Najeela. Having the new Samit obviously being such a large boon for this deck. We talked about Spellskite in our session and how effective that is at protecting these creature combos, and I heard that it did pretty well in the tournament this weekend. But yeah, apart from that, it's a pretty standard Najeela list. It's really cool to once again have this turnaround from a list that we talked about a decent amount, and you know, we took a bunch of pieces from a lot of the Najeela lists that had been doing well over the past few months and slapped them together for this one, and it got this player top 16. So congrats to Shadow Walker, and pretty cool. And just a reminder that if you're interested in CEDH coaching yourself, feel free to hit me up on my ComedIanMTG@gmail.com email, or hit me up on Twitter or Discord. Any of those places, just send me a message if you're curious about details, stuff like that. We have Tempo Bento by Coco. Coco is a player who's gone to a number of these in-person tournaments and just genuinely someone I really enjoy playing with. I actually got to play with them round, I want to say 4 of the Swiss during this tournament, and it was a really fun time. Just generally like one of the players I enjoy playing with the most because they're just such a nice person and really fun to enjoy games with, and they're really fun to like politic with and like do the thing in the game. So yeah, they're here top 16 with this Najeela list. It's that is not a Najeela list. I get paid to talk about this. This is what I give you. I call Yuriko Najeela, apparently. So yeah, we have a pretty standard Yuriko thing. For those who don't know, Yuriko Tempo is all about getting chips in with Yuriko and trying to flip over these big spells like Shadow Mortality and Street Wraith and, you know, Seagate Restoration, Temporal Trespass, and Enter the Infinite. All these large CMC spells to deal your opponents a ton of damage. And one of the main benefits of Yuriko is that because it's going for this damage game plan and its backup win con is the classic Thassa's Oracle win, you don't really have to overcommit to any sort of pieces that get really hurt by stacks. So for example, in this list, you can play things like Grafdigger's Cage, one of the best stacks pieces in the format, Curse Totem, and Null Rod. And these pieces are so hateful to like a lot of what your opponents are going to be doing in the format that it's just really, really solid and really powerful to be able to just shut down your opponents in such an aggressive way. And Yuriko's so good at like having that consistent damage over and over again that when you use these pieces to sort of bind you into the late game, it really, really sets you up for a lot of success. One of the newest additions to the deck is one of the newest additions to several decks in the format, being Orcish Bowmasters. Definitely good as just like a tempo piece, and you know, sometimes Yuriko can struggle to, you know, when it gets a little out tempo by card draw, and Bowmasters definitely helps to snipe those cards down a little bit. Apart from that, it's a lot of evasive creatures. I like seeing that Nashi is in this one. I know it was recently removed from one of the other popular Yuriko lists, but I've always been a fan of that as one of the main ninja payoffs. Mist Syndicate Naga, I also see like going in and out of a lot of Yuriko lists, but this card's insane, and I watched as this card almost completely hosed the game that we were playing. I had Coma on board, thank god that I flipped that over from Kinnan, and I had to sack 2 coils every single time to stop the 2 Nagas that were on the field, because if they didn't, the game was just going to get out of control super insanely quickly. So that was definitely a bit crazy for sure. Yeah, and apart from that, the deck is trying to flip over these big spells, trying to get in with a lot of your evasive flyers that eventually you ninjutsu into Yuriko, and then because the CMC of the deck is actually wanting to be higher, you get a lot of these really, really cool free spells that the deck plays and kind of gets to break parity on, because they are normally not being played in a lot of black decks, because you don't want to be artificially boosting your curve, you want to be lowering it because of ad nause. But in this deck, you get to play cards like Submerge and Contagion and Snuff Out and all of these very high CMC cards, because they're not only dealing damage to your opponents, but they're also being awesome free spells. Congrats to Coco on making top 16 with this list. We have Sharky MO2 with Fool's Gold here at an in-person top 16 performance, which is really cool because Sharky's done done very, very well at a number of online tournaments, but has yet to sort of get a paper top 16 until this point, unless I'm very much mistaken, but I do not believe so. So congrats to them for making the top 16 with this deck. For those who don't know, this is sort of like, I mean, it's definitely a Grixis Turbo list, right? I actually played against them in the top 16 with a Rogsai pilot, and he was like, you know, hey, I'm playing your deck, but with card draw, referring to Rogsai. So definitely very much in leaning into the Grixis Turbo mentality, but this one obviously leaning a little bit more into the ability to grind in the mid to late game, as opposed to Rogsai, which is definitely a little bit more all in, apart from cards like Mystic, Ristic, and the One Ring, basically. So this one's playing Narset, definitely, and Notion Thief, as well as Bowmaster. So this list definitely trying to take full advantage of, you know, all the wheels it is playing. Only playing the 3 of Time Twister, Windfall, and Wheel of Fortune, obviously referred to as sort of the best wheels for a long time historically. We have Mnemonic Betrayal in here, and when you're playing this many wheels, Meme Bet is yet another payoff for playing a bunch of wheels. A lot of the standard Grixis Turbo stuff, definitely not anything too insane from what I know looking through this list, but one of the more interesting things is Deflecting Swat and Fierce Guardianship in a list with 2 5 mana value commanders, which is pretty crazy, but also understandable because, you know, a lot of the point of the deck is to get a Crom or a Tevesh down really early and leverage a ton of advantage by turboing them out. You know, you don't always have to mulligan to an Adnaz when you can pump all your mana into one of your very expensive grindy commanders, right? So very interesting list here, and congrats to Sharky for taking a top 16 with it. Shout out to Curse Totem being in the deck, which is, I know a lot of players have been looking at this more so than they have for a long time. I would say Curse Totem is definitely a piece that has been overlooked for a considerable amount of time, and I'm starting to see some of these more Grixis Turbo decks pick it up as sort of one of the mid-range pieces to shut down the more creature-oriented decks, especially if you expect decks like Sisay and Kinnan a lot in the format. It's a good piece to pick up, which I hate saying because I don't like encouraging people to hate on decks that I really like. We have the Fervent Alchemist here with Narset Enlightened Exile. This is a super cool list. It's definitely very atypical. Kai has sort of been hyped around this list. We actually, because Kai lives in the same town that I do, so we have a Discord, and as soon as this card was spoiled, he immediately was talking about brewing this deck. So pretty cool to see this list and making a top 16 here at this very large in-person tournament. We actually were in the last round of the Swiss together, and we both needed that draw to be able to lock in our top 16 spots indefinitely, and we were able to do that together, so it was pretty funny. But we did not play in the top 16. This list is, from Kai's own description, Turbo Breach. This is all about getting Breach down as soon as possible and then using Narset's ability to cheat it back into play. The idea of this deck is really to just mill a bunch of stuff into our graveyards, and then you can also attack, and if you pump Narset enough, you can cast your opponent's ad nauseams out of their graveyard and things like that. So Narset definitely a very breach heavy deck, very much caring about the graveyard, and then just sort of doing the explosive Jeskai stuff, right? You get access to some of the best payoffs in red and white, like Dockside, Ranger Captain, Grand Abolisher, all of those things that we know from more turbo ad nauseum style decks, and then you get cards like Merchant Scroll to go grab your intuitions and things like that. Definitely a healthy amount of artifacts in this list, which I really like if you're going fast, right? This is a list that definitely likes to put pedal to the metal, and I love seeing a good amount of artifacts that are going to consistently get you your Mox Ambers, your Mox Ovals, all those things, and turn them online pretty early. Lightning Greaves, which I've been seeing more and more with these commander-centric decks, and I always appreciate that people aren't afraid to play cards that are considered more casual in a competitive space because they're good for a reason. Mesmeric Orb obviously being a very hype card in this deck, a classic staple of if you're milling people's graveyards, this is a card you're going to want to play, but definitely a spicier option. Very excited to see it here. This deck is playing Wheel of Misfortune and Windfall to sort of fill the graveyard and things like that. So cards like, there's no Narset in here, which is kind of interesting, but there is a Smothering Tithe, which definitely has a payoff for a bunch of wheels, and also is just generally a good card if you're trying to, you know, storm off, use a bunch of value and things like that. I love seeing Thunderclap in a 3-color deck alongside a Daze. Definitely very brazen for sure. Otherworldly Gaze, not a card I ever thought I would see in a cEDH deck, but if you need to consistently dump cards in the graveyard, it's a really clean way of doing that for sure. Angel's Grace, Wild Interaction spells. There's a lot of really spicy cards in this deck, and a lot of things that people aren't ready for sure. sure. One of the more interesting cards in this list is Jace the Perfected Mind. It has a lot of interesting abilities that, once again, if you're trying to do a mill strategy, it definitely can help with that. So it's -2, allows a player to mill 3, and then if a graveyard has 20 more cards, you draw 3, or otherwise you draw 1 card. So I can definitely see circumstances where this comes down as a 3-mana draw 3, especially with so heavy a graveyard focused deck. But then also the -X ability is target players mills 3 times X cards. So if you pay 3 mana into it, you can mill 9 right away with Jace, and then if you pay 4 mana into it, it mills 15 cards. So I can definitely see, I believe that actually just straight up works with Lion's Eye Diamond and Underworld Breach. If you just want to pay the 3 and the 2 life, you can loop through most of your deck, and then usually you'll probably have way more life than you need to make that work. And then obviously you need to go a little bit deeper, then you can start using some of those extra cards you got from the initial mills to be able to mill a little bit deeper by paying the 4 mana for the spell and milling 15 cards every time you recast it. So it's definitely a spicy include for sure, and a unique card that I've never seen in a cEDH list. That part's pretty cool. Now I'm seeing Fervent Mastery here, and Kai's name is Fervent Alchemist, and I'm wondering if this may be a bit of bias here in this deck. But really cool to see cards like Seize the Day. It's like one of my favorite cards in Commander that like doesn't see a ton of play in cEDH except for some really spicy lists like this, the old Narset, stuff like that. So it's pretty cool. And yeah, this is a really unique list. Very cool to see this like Turbo Breach deck win through some pretty unusual means, and it's really cool. That seems to be like the main way that this deck actually wins the game, so I'm kind of curious what happens if you lose your Breach in this list, and I'd love to hear from Kai maybe a little bit of clarification on that one. But definitely a really cool deck, and very cool to see it make the top 16 here. So our next 2 lists in this top 16 are both Keurig Son of Yawgmoth lists, and I figured I might as well just compare the 2 of them. So I have my first list here, and then we have our list that did just a tiny bit better in the Swiss, and we're going to compare them. 14 cards different between these lists. The cEDH Wilkes list by Docklime, and then we have our Jared Crick by Reberg. And yeah, so definitely some significant differences here in both these lists. Have Braids and Pestilence, which I know is definitely like a control piece I've heard a lot of people talk about in these lists. We have Razaketh lines in this variant with cards like Meat Hook Massacre, and this one's playing a Bolas Acido. So it seems like the cEDH Wilkes version definitely has a significantly higher mana value than our other deck here in the top 16. But first of all, it's kind of crazy to see 2 Keurig lists in the top 16 period. Very much a list that is around a lot, and is a list that a lot of people respect, a list that I always hear about winning super quickly and super explosively, but never seems to get there at the tournament level. And I don't know if it's because people aren't playing it as much in the tournament scene, or if it's just because it's been a list that's been struggling in the current meta. But as we're going through these top 16s, you'll definitely notice there's a lot of quick decks in this. This was also the first major paper tournament with 75-minute no extra turns for the rounds. So this is the quickest official paper tournament we've had to date, and I think that might have something to do with the fact that we do have a lot of speedier lists here in this tournament. Now, there are definitely some exceptions to the rule that we'll talk about a little bit later, but definitely some quicker lists. We have a lot of turbo stuff. We have Keurig, which is arguably just mono black turbo, right? So definitely a lot of fast decks here. But back to the comparisons. Interested to hear why Mutavault has made this Keurig list. I'm not sure if there's also several lists or several lands here, pardon me, that are also creatures, which I'm not really sure why you need that for a Keurig list. And I'm pretty sure it's got something to do with combo that I'm unaware of. So that part's pretty interesting. And Deluge obviously helped control some of the creature matchups. Something to note about this tournament in general, the Swiss rounds did feel very grindy. And, I think there were a lot of decks like Tivit and Kinnan there. There were 14 Tivits apparently in the tournament, and none of them made the top 16, spoiler alert. So definitely an interesting tournament, just given the fact that our most consistent deck in the format right now is consistently out of this top 16. And I believe we've also covered the only Najeela list in the top 16. So definitely different than what we're used to in this tournament. But yeah, it's super interesting to see these lists that we are commonly associating with this format right now just not show up in very high numbers. So the first thing I'm noticing here is between these 2 lists, this list is running the cEDH Wilkes one. It has 1, 2, 3, 4 lands different. 5 lands different. And this one only has 1 land different, meaning that the Wilkes list is actually on 4 more lands than this list by Rayberg, which just did, once again, marginally better during the Swiss. As it is kind of funny that these lists were both the 10th and 11th lists having the exact same record with just marginally better breakers, which is kind of interesting that these two Keurig lists did nearly identical performances in this tournament. But yeah, it's really cool stuff. I mean, Keurig's a really interesting deck in general, so definitely some interesting stuff here as far as the differences between the two. We have Withering Boon here, which is definitely a spicy card. You basically pay a colorless mana and 5 life to counter a creature spell, which is kind of interesting with Keurig on the battlefield, and if not, you're paying 2 mana and 3 life. We have Dismember here, just a piece that's been really good in the format. A lot more creature removal I'm noticing in this list. We have creature counter, Dismember, Fatal Push, Cut Down, and Infernal Grasp in this version. So definitely, and Defeat the Swarm, and Baleful Mastery. So yeah, just full of creature removal in this variant. Rain of Filth there, obviously great at converting your lands into the colorless mana you need, because Keurig covers the black mana for a lot of your spells. And that's more tutors here with Dark Petition, Diabolic Tutor, a lot of that stuff. So really interesting stuff in this Keurig list. It's always a deck that I'm super interested in. It's definitely very atypical when compared to a lot of the stuff in the format, and definitely really cool to see it play here. And then we're going to check out the cards that these lists share in common, which they're sharing 85 cards, so a good amount. You can agree on some of the pieces here, see a lot of the speedier pieces, things like Jet Medallion, Jewel Lotus, a lot of the mana to get you down your Keurigs extremely quickly. A lot of your rituals, they both play Peer into the Abyss, because basically it turns into pay 6 life and 4 mana and draw most of your deck, which is very doable for a lot of Keurig lists. I know Shoulderwood's a big staple of the deck nowadays. Bile Blight hilariously is pay 4 life to remove something. Same thing with Grasp of Darkness. Keurig's just a list full of creature removal, and then now they're on Hordling Broodlord lines, which I think is obviously a newer innovation since the card itself is newer. The Necrotic Ooze lines with Grey Merchant of Azeldel is their main win condition, and then Flesh Rather being like a very solid piece in this list. And I can't tell you all the Flesh Rather stuff because I know there are very complicated lines with it, but I know it is one of the that along with the Mirror House card, definitely one of the more premier ways to win with this deck. When you're playing against Keurig, look out for this card. Buried Alive is like one of their main win cons and the easiest card to be able to counter. So never let a Keurig resolve Buried Alive, and you're at least in a good spot. But congrats to these two Keurig pilots for taking a deck that is not always seen at these top tables and getting multiple results with it. So that's pretty cool. Next, we have my Kinnan list. So I took Kinnan to this tournament. I started the tournament 3-2 and was able to ID my last 2 rounds to make this top 16. Ended the Swiss in 5th, so I was pretty happy about that. We lost to a crazy top 16 where Jorman, who ended up winning the whole thing, spoiler alert, had an insane start where he basically turn 1 he top decked a Mystical Tutor to be able to turn 2 grab Consultation, and was able to go off through 2 Rhystic Studies and an Endurance to shuffle his library for the Thoracle win back in. So it was crazy. Rogsai had a Rhystic Study and they didn't draw a blue card for their Force of Will, even though they had like 8 cards in hand, and I didn't draw a single piece of free counter magic. So it is what it is sometimes, but yeah, it was definitely a crazy top 16 match. It was a little sad to see it be such a short match after the 2 days of grinding out hard matches, but still it was really cool to lose to a player who I know pretty decently, and definitely a player who has been around the scene for quite some time. Let's check out this Kinnan list. It is my list that is the most recent updates of everything I've been working on with the archetype. Some new additions for my historically playing this list. I added Glen Elendra recently. I saw it in some other Kinnan lists that have been doing pretty well, and I tried it out and it was awesome. It's not the best as far as like if you have to invest into it, right? 4 mana and then 5 mana to counter the first spell is obviously not the best rate you want to be going for, but just this uncounterable non-creature counter on a stick that happens twice is just such a solid engine, and it definitely can really get out of hand very quickly. One of the interesting parts is I had Coma in this list for this tournament, which is one that I've played before. I actually was thinking about getting a Thorn Mammoth and swapping it out for a Coma, but I did not get a Thorn Mammoth in time to be able to do that. So Coma stayed in the list and definitely did put in a lot of work for me. So hard to know whether I'm going to make that switch. It might be worth just testing Thorn Mammoth in its stead, but yeah, Coma still puts in a decent amount of work, and it makes a lot of bodies really quickly, shuts off a lot of combos. So definitely still a very good card. I cut a few cards that people might know from the list. Before I was on like Neoform and Eldritch Evolution, and I just cut those for better cards basically. I know I cut the Neoform and and I know I got at least Eldritch Evolution so that I could add Chord of Calling into the list, because that was actually a newer addition to the deck. Chord of Calling being a very good card in general. I was just not really sure how it worked with Kinnan, but it was an insane overperformer, and it was kind of one of those cards where, as I said, like I originally got this list from a few trusted other friends and people I know in my space, so I sort of just took their list and like tried it for the first time in a couple swaps, and I didn't even realize Chord of Calling wasn't in the list until pretty recently. And as soon as I put it in, I immediately loved it, and I have zero regrets about its inclusion. It's definitely going to stay in the list forever, and it definitely kept me in a game that I was very, very close to losing. So Chord is very, very strong, very consistent. Love the card, and it's nice not having the cards like Neoform and Eldritch Evolution, just because the mana values of this deck are so diverse. They're so different. I do miss the ability to like Neoform a dork into a Spellskite or something like that, or Eldritch Evolution to do the same thing. But I think there's so few cards that are really insane payoffs at these early mana values, as opposed to the many, many cards in the higher mana value that are definitely worth the payoff. So cards like Chord and things like that are going to be sticking in the list a little more. Tezzeret's also one of my new additions. Really good at grabbing your win cons like your Basalt Monolith or your Mirage Mirror if you already have Basalt Monolith, but it's also amazing in the games where you don't have Kinnan out or you want to try and play slow to just be able to go and grab your One Ring, which is also another addition to this list. The One Ring, obviously staple of the format at this point, very, very strong. Happy to be playing it. Yeah, Kinnan. And I believe I was the only Kinnan to make the top 16, which is really interesting because Kinnan had such an insane run at Cookout, and it's been doing very, very well in the format right now. So it was very interesting that, it was just me up here. And, it's really just another factor of this tournament where we had one Najeela, one Kinnan, and 0 Tivits in the top 16, which is definitely a big shift from the past few tournaments and what we've been expecting from a lot of these. We're still seeing decks like Blue Farm, still seeing decks like Rogsai, but these other decks that we've come to know and love and see a decent amount of in this tournament, and also were many copies in the Swiss. Like I kept hearing about, oh wow, there's a ton of Tivit today, oh wow, there's a ton of Kinnan today, and once again, I was the only Kinnan to break through, and no Tivits broke through. So it's definitely a very interesting observation about the format. I'm wondering if the format basically got so mid-range that they sort of ground each other out of contention, and then the faster decks sort of took advantage of the mid-range fight. It's hard to say, that's an observation I could have made like through the tournament. I think that there were definitely times where Kinnan is being respected, obviously a little bit more, and same with Tivit. Tivit's definitely being respected at the table a lot more than it used to be. So, we even have very good pilots not doing as well with the deck as they used to be, So very interesting stuff here, and interested to see how the meta continues to develop, knowing that these decks that once again are known for doing quite well did not perform as usual. So we have a duplicated list by Zane, by Benzlobe. So Ben is our champion of the first Silicon Dynasty, a great player, a great judge in the community, and someone who's just very, very good at the game. Will often like take months off from playing and go play other games for months and then come back and do well at a tournament. I think he played 0 games on this deck before playing it this week because he was in my top 16 and we talked about it a little bit ahead of time. Mold to 4 in our pod, or 3? Mold to 3 or 4 in our pod, and was able to play a turn 1 Ristic Studies. That was pretty insane. And they were the player in our pod who had the Force of Will but no blue cards after drawing like 8 cards off the Ristic Study. But definitely an interesting top 16 match. But yeah, this is literally Zane's Rogsai list, and Ben played it here in this, and it's the classic Rogsai stuff. We're talking about the 24 lands down to the grinding station stuff that we talked about last week. That is sort of a change from the standard Rogsai, but I'm a big fan of. Players playing Conqueror's Flail now, which as I mentioned is a newer development. Flail definitely just another defense grid, another way to make sure that your wins go through. It's a great way for Rogsai to be able to punch without having that white in their deck that, being a color to be able to protect their win cons like we expect. But apart from that, it's the classic Rogsai stuff. Trying to do Turbo Ad Nauseam, trying to win with Thoracle. Orcish Bowmaster is one of the newest developments to the deck because you're already playing so many wheel effects. You might as well have a great payoff for it. So really cool stuff. Yeah, classic Rogsai, going fast, going quick, getting wins. This is one of 2 Niv Mizzets in our top 16. Niv Mizzet Perun by Music Cali T. Really interesting stuff. And when we talk about the other Niv Mizzet deck a little bit later in this tournament, we will compare the two lists. But this is our classic Niv Mizzet combo control deck, right? We've got our Niv Mizzet lines. This is an interesting one because it's playing Glinthorn Buccaneer, so it's actually a nice secondary way to be able to combo off these curiosity effects like Tandem Lookout, Curiosity, and Ophidian Eye, which the other two are down here in the enchantment section. So I always appreciated Niv Mizzets having a backup way to win because there's going to be situations where your commander gets killed 3 or 4 times, and you got to try and win the game through that. So I like that a little bit. Or something like a Homeward Path or a Gilded Drake happens, they take your commander even though you have answers for it. Obviously you're in like Spellsky or Gilded Drake, right? But yeah, this deck is usually just based around the idea you want to get your commander Niv Mizzet down really, really fast, really good at pinging off the dork decks in the format, a lot of the creature decks that are trying to play a bunch of creatures and then turn those into a win. Yeah, the deck tries to get Dockside down early, you grab your Trinket Mage, go grab your Jeweled Lotus, obviously all great additions to the deck. This one playing Treasonous Ogre to cover up the fact that the blue mana's in abundance because it's a control deck, but the red mana tends to be a little bit of a struggle for this type of list. And Nezahal, once again, the backup Niv Mizzet that we all need and love. But yeah, this deck's been doing really, really well lately. I'm really interested to see. We also had another Niv Mizzet pilot just sort of miss the, I think they were on a win and in for the top 16 as well, completely independent of these other two. They almost got there as well. So Niv Mizzet apparently a pretty decent deck to be bringing to the tournament scene. It's a very solid creature. Like, it's one of my favorite cards of all time, and it's definitely a list I am going to be considering sleeving up pretty soon. One of the reasons I played Malcolm Kedis last weekend at the Chaos event was literally to be able to cast Niv Mizzet really easily. It's one of my favorite cards, and so seeing it see play here, multiple top 16 performances in this tournament is really freaking cool. So congrats to our tournament player here. We have Grixis Pirates by Dino Mander. This one's really cool. So this is one of the players that I met back when I lived in Massachusetts. This list sort of, was loosely inspired back then by my original Grixis Pirates list that I brought to that tournament. So I did a lot of innovations with the list, basically taking out the ad nauseum lines, adding Consecrated Sphinx and Niv Mizzet, throwing in a few light reanimation things like Reanimate and Animate Dead, and being able to use that in combination with your Underworld Breach lines and your Glinthorn Buccaneer lines, going less to the ad nause plan and more to this like grindy mid-range plan. And then I kind of stopped playing the deck after I sort of made that version of it, just because I was getting a little bit of hate in local tournaments and stuff like that. And then I heard the next time I went, and this is back when I was still in Massachusetts, that it was a deck that a lot of people were picking up and playing, and our pilot here, Dino Mander, being one of the people who played it the most and really, really falling for this deck, and has done a ton of work to take it, way farther than the original version that I was playing, and I believe went undefeated during the Swiss with this deck. Really, really cool list. It is just Malcolm Vile Smasher, doing the sort of classic, you have black, so you can easily get your Glenhorn Buccaneer lines, and then, having, once again, these big payoffs for Malcolm consistently giving you mana, and then some reanimation stuff, because a lot of the reanimation lines allow you to, like, end step, Entomb a Glinthorn, reanimate it, and if not, you're doing that, then you're getting the Niv or the Consecrated Sphinx, things like that, which is really, really cool. And I love to see that this list got played at this tournament and did so well. Sad to see you didn't make top 4 with it and didn't take down the whole thing, because it's just a really cool deck. And a lot of innovation, as I said, since I stopped working on the deck, playing Mayhem Devil, which I played them in the Swiss of this tournament, and Mayhem Devil was the control piece that took over the game, because it was like Kinnan, Winota, and Nigila, which just could not break through the Mayhem Devil control lock, which was pretty cool. Yeah, this deck is super sweet. I like that there are Notion Thief, not Bowmasters. It's a card I'm a big fan of. I know Bowmasters is obviously taken over a lot of the slots, and it's obviously very bad against Bowmasters, but Notion Thief is still my preferred one of these two, although I usually haven't had the courage to play it as of late. But this deck is super awesome. I love seeing it. It's definitely an atypical list, leaning heavier into some like stronger counterspell options, things like Drown and Lock, Mana Drain. But the main innovations from our pilot here are using the Trickery Charm lines and Artificial Evolution to be able to turn things like your Mayhem Devils and your Reckless Fireweavers into actual win cons with the deck. Mayhem Devil being like the coolest one to do it with. So if you have it and your commander at any point, you can just instant speed artificial evolution one of your creatures, or I mean specifically your Mayhem Devil, and then start comboing off with Malcolm's ability to make treasures, which is really sweet because, you know, we've been talking about how strong adding instant speed win cons are for the format at the current moment, and the ability to just 1 mana turn your creature into a win con is really, really solid. I love seeing that this deck did well. It's like, it makes me so happy. You know, we talked about it a little bit afterwards. I think Intuition's going to be the next card, probably out of the deck, with the One Ring, obviously a great inclusion in here. And just, yeah, this list is awesome. I'm so glad it is still being played, even though I dropped it. And really happy to see Dinomander continuing to play this list. It's really cool, and especially just cool to see a list that you know, I brought to, at the time was my local LGS, just have all these evolutions brought to it, and in this new version that is just really solid and has a lot of love and devotion put into it. So it's pretty awesome. Also, it's just really cool to see anyone from my old shop make a top 16 at a major tournament. So I feel MT inside by Cat6 Kaiju. This player was our #1 seat leaving the Swiss, and unfortunately did not make it to the top 4, but was playing this Malcolm Timna list. Very much a pretty standard Malcolm Timna list. I know they said they had some differences between this and Ben Loeb's list from the Silicon Dynasty, and I'm actually willing to pull those up. Yeah, so the main differences here being definitely a lot more mid-rangey creatures in this MT Inside version, right? So whereas mulling for Malcolm, the list that won Silicon Dynasty, definitely has a lot more instants and sorceries, pieces like Gush that make it a little bit better with the Doomsday lines, a few more Tutors and Grim Tutor and Praetor's Grasp, and some more Talismans, which, you know, I've been saying for a little bit, the Talismans are just really awkward with Malcolm in the command zone, and I actually really like the idea of being able to remove these pieces from the deck to just clean it up a little bit. This list also not on Lion's Eye Diamond, even though it still is a Doomsday list. Oh, actually, sorry, it's not a Doomsday list at all. So, oh, that's really interesting. So this list really just winning with Thassa's Oracle Demonic Consultation, which is really cool. Also something I would never find the courage to do myself in one of these tournaments, not even on Laboratory Maniac. So like, if Thassa's Oracle is gone from this deck, I guess you can hope to win by stealing your opponent's win con with Opposition Agent, and Mnemonic Betrayal as well. But like, that's not a lot of ways to actually win the game, so that's kind of crazy. I'm genuinely very surprised that they were able to win so much with only a single win condition. Obviously Thoracle is a good one, but I just found that decks that only have that one win con are usually struggling a decent amount in the format. So pretty crazy stuff. But yeah, congrats to our pilot here for making Malcolm Timna look really good at this tournament. I've been saying it's one of those decks that's like, it's a little bit, I think, boring for people to play in general, so it does not get played as much as, you know, other decks in the format. But it's still very solid, very strong. You have the consistency of Malcolm leaning into your Timna, the two of them synergizing extremely well together. You know, both of them wanting to get into make damage in the combat step, and getting mana and card draw as a reward for it. But yeah, still mind blown that this list did so well with, once again, a single win condition. But yeah, Malcolm Timna really showing up and cleaning up house. Just missing that top 4 and doing extremely well during the Swiss of this tournament. So congrats to our pilot for putting up a really good show. Before we get into that top 4, remember that LotusCon is growing closer and closer. Before it was something in the distant future, but now it is almost that time. October 7th and 8th, Belleville, Illinois. There's going to be a cEDH main event paying out to the top 32, a time twister for first place. So many prizes. It's going to be the combination of like a MagicCon event and a cEDH main event tournament. There's going to be so much to do there. I'm so excited to be there to see what happens at the first event Monarch gets since it's reopening, and it's going to be really cool, and I'm very excited to catch it. Here's our other Niv Mizzet list. We have Primal Niv by Shauna. Shauna making it to the top 4 of this tournament with Niv, the deck she's been playing forever. Well, let's do a little comparison here. Main difference is that Shauna's list is on a few more bounce spells here with things like Unsub and Geist Wave, stuff like Snapback, yeah. Which when I played against Shauna in Cookout, And yeah, display screen Essence Flux as well, right? So a lot of different ways to flicker and bounce your creatures. Really good payoffs for Dockside. I think when I played against Shauna at Cookout, she played and bounced Dockside like 6 times during that match. So definitely showing that is something this list is trying to actively do. And a few more counter spells here with Spell Pierce, Miscast, and Lightning Bolt, and actual factual counter spell and Stubborn Denial. So also playing Lorien Revealed, which I think is actually really, really solid in a Nimzit list. I don't think they're on Mystic Sanctuary unless I'm mistaken. Oh, they are on Mystic Sanctuary. So the cool part about Lorien Revealed is that it is island cycling, any type of island. So you can go get a Volcanic Island with it, but you can also go grab your Mystic Sanctuary, which in a deck that pays off with instants and sorceries seems pretty good. So down here on the Niv Mizzet list that we looked at earlier, this one's on the One Ring, which I'm kind of surprised that Shauna's not on, seeing as how powerful the One Ring is in the format right now. Down in Izzet Signet, Glenhorn Buccaneer, which we talked about being the backup WinCon, a card I was a pretty big fan of. And then it seems like a land or two. No, they just have 2 lands, swap for 2 lands. But interesting, no Brainstorm in Shauna's list either, which is pretty cool. And a Wheel, which I think that makes a decent amount of sense. Wheels are a little greedy for a list that is trying to, grind out the game, play control, but also obviously pays off a lot better in the early game. So definitely some interesting differences between these lists. But yeah, Shauna's been consistently putting up results in multiple tournaments, either online or in person, and continuing to do well over and over again. So very impressive run by Shauna, continuing to do well with the deck that she specializes with. We have Grixis Enchantments by Zane. So we saw Ben's Loeb copy this exact list and make the top 16 with that deck, and now we have Zane here who, according to his own words, punted the win for this game, which is rather unfortunate, and is not our champion of Festival of Nights, but very, very close to making the top 4 here. Doing very well with Rogsai, which he just won the Surfside event with. Pretty solid to go back-to-back, winning a tournament and then showing up and making the top 4, and very close to winning this one as well. So congrats to Zane on a very impressive run here. A pilot who has been, before even working with Eminence and all of that, has been doing very well in the format for a considerable amount of time. Originally playing Tana Malcolm, but now moving definitely into some more aggressive lists for sure. I did play against them on round 2 of the tournament. We lost on turn 2 to a turn 2 Atnos after a turn 1 6 study. So that we got schooled a little bit that game, but yeah, Zane's a very good pilot, very quick and very solid at doing what they do. They make storm turns look very easy when they execute them, but they're very good at what they do, and a very good Rogsai player. But yeah, we looked at this exact list earlier, so not really too much to say other than 24 lands, Rogsai, going fast, playing Grinding Station, Defense Grade, Conqueror's Flail, trying to stop your opponents interacting with you and trying to absolutely slam the gas pedal and win as quickly as possible. And it's a deck that's been doing better lately. I don't know if the meta is shifting back to a place where Rogsai could take advantage of it more, but yeah, Rogsai is doing very well. And obviously, huge shout out to Zane for doing well with it. So what's really cool about this tournament is that the next 2 players and the top 2 players for this event are both from the same local playgroup. They are both members of the Ramp Gang, which is where, Alan of Mental Misplay was like his original playgroup. Just like a really cool group of people, some of my favorite people in the CEDH community. They show up, they play their decks, and this list in particular is made by Vice Draken, who their list inspired me to play Sisay for the first time. So a lot of if you actually look in the description of my Sisay list, it says inspired by Ramp Gang Malcolm, and this is their list. So this is what they're working with currently. We spent a lot of time at the tournament talking about the new cards from Wilds of Eldraine, how that's going to change the deck and stuff like that. But Malcolm's been doing really well with this list lately. Got in the top 4 of Punt City 2 and got in the top 4 of this tournament here with the Sisay list. Malcolm's been playing this deck religiously for years, so it's really, really cool to see the payoff of making the top 16 of this tournament. We have the classic stuff with this deck, trying to, cheat in Teferi to lock down the board, winning with the Aminatu, Nicol Bolas, and Oath of Teferi lines. The classic stuff there. This one running Oath of Nissa, Cultist of the Absolute as, one of those very optional pieces in the deck. I was talking with Malcolm about the deck, and they said they're not on Dihada because Dihada scares them too much with the mill, basically. He said there's been too many times when he's milled over important pieces that he was just about to go get with Dihada, and there's very few ways to get things back out of the graveyard graveyard. Vivian Champion of the Wilds is definitely a new one for this deck that I've never seen before. Really cool. Just get a bit of card advantage, also give all your creatures flash. Kind of interesting to be able to like tutor it with Sisay and then flash in your creatures in response to stuff. Definitely a new innovation for this list that I really like. It's very cool. Malcolm's been on Kiora for a while, very good with a lot of the untapped combos for sure. Ashiok being the opposition agent of this list, but a legendary one. I choose to play the real Oppo because I like flash and the ability for it not to be attacked down, but this one can obviously be grabbed with Sisay, so there's definitely a little bit of give and take with those variants. This list also playing Eska, God of the Tree, definitely the card that's been like my 101st Sisay card for a long time. I think it's really solid, but just haven't wanted to include it as of yet. But yeah, really solid at being able to get you the Sisay mana that you need to be able to start getting those activations. Nyambi was one that I actually talked about Malcolm because I never understood why it was in the list, but he was basically like, yeah, it's just instant speed, add 2 devotion or mana to Sisay, right? And then also pick up your Dockside. And I was like, okay, it's a legendary way to be able to pick up Dockside, which is actually really relevant in a number of situations. So definitely really cool to see that innovation with this deck. And it's definitely a card I'm going to have to start looking at, unfortunately, because it's not one that I really wanted to play. But it got kind of sold to me. Pretty cool. Chainer, another really cool one in this list. Very much an older piece for the deck, but one that a lot of people like. Urtai, one that I can never get to work in the deck, but I know a lot of people really high on this card when it was first spoiled. And Lawan, really cool to see in this deck. Some hate for blue spells, stopping your opponent's casting Thassa's Oracle, and really good at like anti-Kinnan tech too. Bouncing a lot of their big blue creatures is pretty solid, so really cool to see that. Down to very few sorceries, cutting Diabolic Intent, cutting Imperial Seal, really just trying to make the game plan as clean as possible for this list. And yeah, this is pretty solid. This is a list that Malcolm's put a lot of work into this deck, and it changes a decent amount after every tournament. Genuinely, I'm just it's really cool to see just players who show up, are just awesome members of the community, and really put a lot of work into their lists, and it's really cool to see it. So congrats, Malcolm, on this top 4. And we have our winner, Twang, the person who eliminated me from the top 16, and another player from the Ramp Gang, just really a whole group hustling, doing really well. We've got Jorman or Twang's Blue Farm list here. Just a player you should probably know playing Blue Farm, a deck that they're really solid with. It's obviously not a whole ton to say about Blue Farm here, but Jorman has been playing this deck a lot, and between a lot of local events and some higher up cEDH events, has been showing up and putting up results wherever he goes, and genuinely is just a very solid player, a good member of the community, and just a really cool person. Once again, love seeing the One Ring in Blue Farm. I've been saying for a while, I think that's pretty necessary. This list on One Ring, Fire Covenant, Adnaz, not really going too hard in the Adnaz because the lifestyle can be cared about, but still a lot of mid-range pieces here. This list choosing to not run Pier, playing Wheel and Mnemonic Betrayal, there's a big debate in a lot of the Blue Farm lists about which variations you end up with that combination of cards. But yeah, Blue Farm, solid list. It's gonna keep doing well. It is very powerful, and congrats to German on getting this tournament, taking down the entirety of the Festival of Nights with this deck. It was really funny actually. After our top 16 match, I was joking around with German. I was like, all right, buddy, you knocked me out of the tournament, you better win the whole thing, and he did, so it's pretty cool. If you like top 16 breakdowns like this, please make sure to hit like and subscribe. Let YouTube know that you enjoy these. If you want to be supportive of this channel, every little bit helps, and it helps to allow me to do a bunch of new stuff. I'm pushing out a bunch of content here, and doing a lot of work to make sure the coaching for this channel is continually going and growing. And if you want me out in these tournaments, getting these floor reactions so I can talk to these players, understand what's happening in the meta, all that stuff, the help at Patreon is the reason I can do that stuff. So I want to thank all my patrons, and if you're interested in helping out, check out patreon.com/ComedIanMTG. And also, if you want to be like our player here in the Najila deck, or if you want to be like several other players I've coached over the years and use that coaching to get some top results, feel free to hit me up at comedianmtg@gmail.com, or hit me up on Twitter or Discord. My coaching is available pretty often. There's some spots open on the Patreon right now if you want to use the Patreon coaching, you want that guaranteed monthly slot. But also you can hit me up about sessions outside of the Patreon, which is a question I get a lot, even though I say it on every video. But yeah, feel free to hit me up in my DMs or anything like that if you're curious about cEDH coaching. Thank you all so much for joining me on this video. I can't say enough how grateful I am for this audience, and I will catch you all next time. Peace.